Welcome to KnotWork Storytelling. This is the show where we untangle our myths and reweave our stories, one age-old tale at a time. I'm your host and lead storyteller, Marisa Gowdy. I'm a myth worker, a story healer, a coach for writers and creative entrepreneurs, and the author of The Sovereignty Knot, A Woman's Way to Freedom, Power, Love, and Magic. If you love what you hear and want to support the show, I'd be so grateful if you'd become a paid subscriber on Substack. In my newsletter, Myth is Medicine, you'll receive bonus content related to the stories on the show and deep dives into how mythology and folklore can help heal the individual and the collective in the present moment and beyond. There's a link in the show notes to follow Myth is Medicine on Substack, or visit mythismedicine.substack.com. Season 5, Episode 7, Magic Illuminates the Mundane. A Story of Flidais by Regina de Búrca. Before we dive into this week's story and conversation, I wanted to be sure you know about my summer offerings. On Thursday, August 1st, we'll gather for a 3-hour retreat called Harvest, an online Lunasa retreat. Writers and creatives from around the world will gather for this event, and I hope that you'll join us. As you may know, Lunasa is the first harvest of the Celtic year. There's a rich mythology connected with this celebration. During our time together, I'll tell you the story of the goddess Taltu. It's a story about service, sacrifice, and celebration. It's a deeply important story for anyone who is seeking to do deep creative work and share it with the world. We'll work with this myth and ask it to help us reflect on our year's creative journey to that point. And because it's only the first harvest and there's so much more growing to do, we'll be setting goals and dreaming into the stories you might tell and ideas you might craft in the months to come. In this retreat, you'll have time to write and connect with a beautiful community of myth-minded folks who are on the quest to use these ancient stories to make sense of our modern world. Harvest, an online Lunasa retreat for writers and creatives, is open to everyone. Or it could be your introduction to our global writing community, the Writer's Knot. When you enroll in a 5-month membership in the Writer's Knot, from August through December of 2024, you can attend the Lunasa Writing Retreat for free. Also, one last announcement before we get into the story. If you've been wishing you could join the Writer's Knot in the past, but have never been able to make the time work, I wanted to make sure that you knew. In addition to our traditional noon Eastern on Wednesday gatherings, I'll be starting an additional group that will meet at 7 p.m. Eastern on Mondays. You can find all the details on my website, marisagowdy.com/events. Our guest, Regina de Búrca, was raised in a bookshop in the west of Ireland, where her fascination with the Irish language and mythology all began. In 2010, she graduated with an MA in Writing for Young People from Bath Spa University in England and has had various short stories published since then. She's been an editor of the online speculative fiction magazine The Future Fire since 2009 and was shortlisted for the Minds Shine Bright short story competition for a story about a Sheila na gig. In 2021, she produced the first Irish-language version of the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. Right now, she's working on Journey Through the Tarot via Irish Herstory on Substack, a series of posts that connect historic Irish women to each of the 78 Rider-Waite Tarot cards. Find her at reginadebúrca.substack.com. Regina is generously offering a special discount for podcast listeners. You can save 10% off tarot decks and readings when you use the code KnotWork, with a K, at checkout. Visit theirishtarot.com for more. Well, I am so excited to welcome Regina to the podcast. As is our way at KnotWork Storytelling, first we'll ask the story to speak for itself, and then we'll explore all the ways that it still resonates and matters. So Regina, will you tell us the story?
Thank you, Marisa. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Of all the curses, the bane of plenty is the most brutal. In my home place of light, I had been cursed with an abundance of anything I wanted, conjured with the scarcest effort. Jaded from too much ease, I left there in search of the fresh. I had been granted what I wished for, just like before. Again, too much. Of the flawed and the fickle. There in that place where the broken does not get put back together again. I foolishly forgot that part. Just like I had forgotten the way back. I tried so hard during that first winter to find the threshold betwixt worlds that would lead me home. By in bulk, I had stopped trying. I knew every hard crevice of that place, each rain-drenched bog hole. I had circled that land in vain more times than I wished to remember. Dizzy from treading those wretched, spiraling trails to nowhere. My magic draining and waning as each cycle of the moon passed me by. I wore an amethyst I found in the sand, tied around my wrist, to remind me that I was not without luck in this. Luck that I was not a hostage to the weaknesses of others around me. I did not need possessions as I do. I did not need others as they do. Which was fortunate, seeing how they detested me. The men for the power I wielded. If I did not want them, they were not able to take me at their will, as is their custom. The women hated me for the way their men looked at me. They told their children to stay away. The little ones ran from me in fear, not daring to look me in the eye, in case I cast a spell on them. They called me heartless, dangerous, and cursed. Only 2 of those are true. Of course, this did not stop the men seeking me in my dwelling. Or them all taking the milk my cow Maol could offer hundreds of them, and their families, during one milking. Maol, my only source of joy in that desolate place. As sweet as she is pretty, with her fluffy golden mane, soulful dark eyes, and playful nature. Even her stag-like horns seem more funny than fierce. I often went to the pasture to spend time with her. So mired in my unhappiness, I foolishly missed the ill aspects that had been sent to warn me. On the morning before Litha, Olil Fionn came to my dwelling. He stood close enough for me to smell the meat on his breath, yet didn't look me in the eyes as he said, "Maol is popular with the warriors. Perhaps I could take her tomorrow to the fair and give out the milk. It makes the troops feel like they're being cared for, in a way that is of no expense to me." He asked in a way that meant he expected me to agree. The idea of this savage placing his rough hands on my precious Maol made my stomach lurch. "No one milks Maol but me," I said, in a tone reserved for my most embittered arguments. He blanched, eyes narrowing, staring at me for the first time. "You are my queen of the Gavranra. You shouldn't be doing anything like milking a cow. You're treating her like a child when she's only an animal. People are starting to talk." His voice fell, and something inside me broke. "She is far, far more than just an animal. It's more pleasing to spend time with Maol than any of the other people here in this rotten place. I was about to tell him to leave, but what he said next robbed me of breath, never mind speech. I'll have her slaughtered before long. No one wants an old, dried up piece of beef on their platter. You do well to remember that. His insinuation was not wasted on me as he stormed out of the room. We'll be eating you for dinner before I let anything happen to Maol, I said in his wake, voice breaking with sorrow and disappointment and anger. Charming and pleasant when he was getting what he wanted. Olil Fionn could turn sour and scathing in the beat of a heart. He hid his scornful words with smiles when we were in company, but his jibes returned when we were alone. I could see his masks as clearly as I could see the doom in his future. If only I had been able to see my own. If there was any curse at all, it was that. The maid, a camp follower from the lowlands, came towards me, carrying a basket of rotting apples that needed to be thrown away. You need to be careful with that talk. You've been around for how long now? Easily 2 sounds. Her usually dull eyes glinted with malice as she delivered her blow. He must be looking elsewhere by now. His attentions always start to wane at Litha, you know. Good. They're welcome to him. He has his pleasure and all of mine. And I'll thank you not to subject me to your limitations. I shot a tiny jab of light into her left shoulder. Ow! She looked around for the source of her discomfort. I turned away from her, vexed that I had wasted any precious light on her at all. She was like a moth flitting around a flame, an irritation but precisely because she was so small, not in spite of it. She took one look at my irate expression and blurted out, I'm telling you, the walls have ears. Her eyes darted about madly, as if Olil Fionn himself was hiding under my bed. Yeah, they don't. Even in my home place, they don't. What off with you? I shooed her out the door like an errant hen. A deep sense of unease made me unable to settle. By the time night fell, I felt feverish with foreboding. To appease Olil Fionn, I myself would gather milk for the troops at the fair. I pulled on my shawl, lifted my pail, and was about to make my way to the field when I saw a dead frog lie on the threshold of my dwelling. Even this did not give me pause. I was so heartsick, I was only able of seeking the scant comfort I received from this place. The peace I felt at moonrise, when much of the sky is black. I never had this cloak of near darkness in my home place, and the novelty pleased me. In the moonlight, the trees could be made of silver, and the lake at the edge of the forest shines like a spectre. The stars sparkle almost as brightly. The owls enchant with their golden eyes and haunting cries. Best of all, I am left alone from the stench and the lies and the ugliness. Magic illuminates the mundane. Without it, the sea is just the sea, the sky is just the sky, and the men are just men. Before long, I reached the pasture at the far end of the fort, ringed by a stone wall. There I found Maol, glowing in the moonlight, golden as a dawn that was starting to pierce through the night sky. I picked some flowers, and she let me weave them around her horns without flinching. I pulled a clump of grass and fed it to her from the palm of my hand. There is no greater sense of victory then gaining the trust of a wild creature, as I had back when Maol had scarcely seen her first moon cycle. I wrapped my arms around her as I began to weep. Why did they always threaten the rare and the precious in this world? Why couldn't they just enjoy what my Maol gave them without drawing every last drop? I placed the pail beneath her and got to work. So distracted, it took me a few moments to realize that little more than a trickle of milk had drained into the pail. Hands shaking, I couldn't make sense of it. Maol had never given so little before. The sun was beginning to rise. All I could do was make my way back, heart heavy, still not clear enough to take heed of the warnings. The signs were all there. The scant yield from Maol, the dead frog lying across my dwelling's threshold, the apples that spoiled long before their time. I can see now that I had been crossed. Perhaps I was being called to pay a debt to the other world. Perhaps a sorcerer from this dreadful place had been playing tricks. The only thing I now know for certain was that it was old magic and strong. I knew the vile maid would be cleaning my dwelling, so I decided to sit in the banquet hall to wait until she had finished. As I walked past the servants and courtiers, hushed whispers greeted me as usual. I hadn't even taken a full step across the threshold when I saw Olil Fionn move at the top of the room, about to take his throne, and command a girl I hadn't seen before, young and timid as an orphan kitten, to take my place beside him. She could scarcely have been old enough to have had her first bleed. A rage grew in my heart. Not the type of rage the local women experienced when they had been replaced. I was not angry at her, but at him. I was not even annoyed at the other women in court, who smirked as Olil Fionn's little pageant distracted them from their own miserable lives. I did not share the humiliation they felt in similar circumstances. But as he and his new consort took our places, and his glance passed over me as he beamed proudly, parading the girl as he had once paraded me, I felt a chill like a mortal woman might. The devastation of being trapped in his world, with the prospect of never seeing my home place again, took every last drop of my power, and I struggled to make my way to my quarters without faltering. There is no greater despair than feeling that your best days are behind you. There's a certain exhaustion that comes with this type of weariness. It permeated my bones. I spent days in bed, alone. Nothing could rouse me. All I wanted was mead to help me sleep. Sleep was a sweet, tiny sliver of oblivion, a darkness I could succumb to. But even that respite was denied me much of the time. I stared at the ceiling of my dwelling till I could have drawn each crevice of the mottling, every cavern of the clay. I trudged through the time that followed, scarcely moving from my bed. Until one morning, as I was about to call for more mead, I heard a deep lowing from Maol in the pasture. I shook off my sorrowful stupor to make my way to her, not caring how dishevelled and wretched I looked. Olil Fionn and a band of warriors surrounded Maol. It was only when I pushed through the circle that I gathered that I could see they were taunting her trying to catch her as she darted about in a senseless frenzy. Moving in between them and her, a terrible vision assailed me. In it, the pasture I stood in was covered in blood, and there were but 2 left, but which 2 were not shown to me. When the vision passed, I roared, "Get away from her!" My voice turned into a growl, and the land we stood on reverberated with the sounds, as incandescent despair coursed through me. "We were only messing," said Illuminates. "Just a bit of crack." He smirked, though a shiver of fear passed through his face. A young tall warrior, with an absurd grin, elbowed the warriors between us out of the way and marched towards me, ignoring Illuminates. Unable to tear his eyes away from me, I guessed I must have been the first shining one he had ever met. Their reaction was always the same, spellbound by the light I carried, yet not understanding it, wanting to own it. "I'm Fergus." Illuminates grasped his opportunity to leave and said, "This is the enchanting Lady Flidais, Fergus," his voice dripping with insincerity. He used to call me his lady. "I'll leave you 2 to get to know each other." Turning his back, he and the other warriors left the pasture. Maol nuzzled into me, her body shaking in rhythm with her rapid heartbeat. I worked to calm her with invocations until she eventually returned to herself. If only Maol and I had the ability to return to our homeland. Since that was impossible, we would have to find another part of this desolate land to make a home in. But Illuminates owned every last sod and stone in this land. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I had to escape before Illuminates did away with Maol. There was nothing here for us in this place. I winced as I reflected that there never had been. Looking up, I was surprised to see the stupid warrior still standing there grinning. "What do you want?" "You. I've never seen someone like you before," he said, eyes misty. "Of course you haven't. I was too busy for this. I needed to gather Valerian before nightfall to help ease Maol's distress." "I think you should leave Illuminates and come with me." He leaned closer. Just then, I too spotted an opportunity. "Illuminates is a jealous man. He'd never stand for it." I didn't have to wait long for Fergus to take the bait. "I'm not afraid of him. 1 word from you, my lady, and I will deal with him. I am at your command." He bowed and laughed. "I am not your lady. Yet. So prove it to me. Carry us away from here. Stay under my command until you do." I untied the amethyst from my wrist and put it on his instead, binding him to do my bidding. "Just you wait, you'll owe me," he winked before turning towards Illuminates' quarters and waving back at me inanely after every few steps he took. I chose to overlook his impertinence and foolishness, since what he lacked in sense, he made up for in willingness. Feeling deeply uneasy, I sat on the ground beside Maol, waiting for the doltish Fergus to come back, so we could finally leave this hateful place. I had not planned to fall asleep. When I opened my eyes, I thought the sky was ablaze with the crimson dawn. It took a few moments before I understood. I broke into a run towards a banquet hall that had been set ablaze. People were running around screaming as Fergus and his warriors roared as they slashed and burned. A large bonfire blocked the gate. It wasn't until I reached it that I could see that on top of the burning branches was a severed head of a lulfion. The horror froze me to the spot that I stood on. I hadn't noticed Fergus until he was standing right in front of me. What have you done? I got rid of Lulfion as promised, and I did away with his fort for good measure. But don't worry, I made sure your dwelling was safe, so we've a place to be together until we're ready to leave. He beamed with pride. I asked you to carry us away from him, not kill him. What's wrong with you? Have you no sense? I started to shake. What would become of Maol and me now? His eyes narrowed, and a vein bulged in his neck. That's strange talk from someone who owes me so much. Well, you too will learn to respect me yet. He spat before storming off out the gate. I went to my dwelling, pacing the room, the cries outside too much to bear. Even though Maol would now be safe from a lulfion, I never wanted the cost to be so high. I found a barrel in the corner, drank every last drop, until I fell into a mead-soaked slumber. In what must have been around midnight, Fergus staggered back into the dwelling. The cow would not give milk. I had to deal with her, he said, slinging his pelt over my chair. Bring her to me, I said, not fully awake, entirely not sober, but a strange sense of foreboding rising in me despite all of it. She's not... Fergus looked like he was about to say something, but thought the better of it. I'll have the lads carry her up. Something inside me both understood and broke. I ran, wailing like Bridget, until I reached the pasture. Fergus lumbering behind me. A dead silence hung in the air, the full moon illuminating the pasture through the clouds. I held my breath as my heart recognized Maol before my mind did. Panting and shaking, eyes sealed shut with blood, she sensed me and whimpered. What did you do? I whispered, heartbreak tempering my voice. She's just an animal, Fergus shrugged. You're the animal, I replied, sounding just like the local women now, weak, broken, and overcome. You are just too much. After everything I've done for you, you're still not happy, he said, shaking his head. No matter. There are easier ways to have pleasure. You're not that special. He smirked as he tore off the amethyst and threw it onto the ground, before turning around and running back to the burning fort. I fell to the ground beside Maol. Light poured from my hands as I tried to stem her bleeding and weave her poor, battered body back together. Her low groans pierced my chest, like Fergus's sword had pierced hers. My worst fear had come to pass, and I had been too stupid to see it coming. How Maol was still with me, I could not fathom. I cried with shame and self-hatred at how utterly I had failed her. As the sun rose, the blaze of the fort died down, and as my gaze fell to the ground, I could see that my tears and Maol's blood had pooled together, gathering in a perfect circle, ringed by a wispy light. I had to rub my eyes once, twice, before I could believe what I was seeing. A portal to our home place, growing larger and larger, until it seemed as if the sun had fallen from the sky, turning into a passage of light to bring us home. Perhaps I had paid my debt to the other world. Perhaps they thought I had suffered enough. Or perhaps it was Maol they wanted to deliver from harm, and they weren't thinking of me at all. My little Maol saving me over and over again, despite how I had failed her. As I stared into the tunnel of stars, I knew that even though I did not understand why, that the curse on me had finally been broken. Just like Fergus had branded Maol, I decided to leave my mark on his world before leaving. I placed my hand on the stone wall beside us and closed my eyes, imagining shapes and curves, the heat and light from my palms carving them into the stone. I opened my eyes and removed my hand to reveal the outline of an elderly woman holding herself open, a she like me on her hunkers. A reminder to the other magical ones who may find themselves lost of their power to find the way back, even though they would be tested more than was right, and salvation would neither be quick nor easy. We tumbled down through the portal of light, Maol and I, the warmth of belonging beckoning us home.
Oh, Regina, thank you for that gorgeous, heartbreaking, otherworldly story that just seems like it's about so many of the most beautiful and difficult parts of being human.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I always think in Irish mythology that sometimes the gods and the goddesses, they don't always seem all that otherworldly. They're very close to us in lots of ways. They're as flawed as we are.
And you really brought that out in the sense that Flidais was so certain of her otherness. And there were so many ways in which she was exiled from her own world. And she was so ostracized from the court and from those local women. And yet there she is with such immense human frailty. I mean, she goes for the mead at the moment when she most needs to act and to protect. And there's a part that you want to kind of reach through the story and shake her a little bit, but it's also like, oh, when have I done that? When do I know of that addiction or that need to escape would take over the need to show up? And as from what the more she protested that she wasn't like them, it was the more the sense of, oh, but sister, you are. And I see you for that. And I love you for that.
I think it's a very ironic kind of everything about it is pretty ironic. And I think that really matches the human condition.
Mhm.
And actually did play up the kind of addiction piece to deliberately show her human frailty because, as you say, like we all numb our pain in different ways, some more skillful than others. And to her, it is part of being human. And it's just, I'm fascinated with this idea of the gods becoming mortal and vice versa. I've always been really interested in that. So I just wanted to explore that as well in this story.
And I think you keep it mysterious as we're listening to the story. It's like, what is she doing with Olafune? Like like, why is she there? And she mentions a curse, but it's sort of that she's keeping it a bit of a secret in terms of the reader's just stuck wondering, what is she doing in this terrible situation? And you sort of unfolded, like she is an exile from her own home. This wasn't something occurred, in the backstory we don't fully know about that got her into this really awful situation. So with all of her magic and what do you say? The way that magic illuminates the mundane, it still wasn't quite strong enough until that great breaking point to release her from really being imprisoned in this court.
Absolutely. And I think this journey in this story, I really think it's really showing her moving from sort of quite a lot of arrogance and kind of following the path of power and not love. And really, the only evidence of her loving anything is with Maol. And that's why I spent so long in such a relatively short story describing Maol, where you can't actually tell what anybody else looks like. I left that up to everybody's imagination. But I suppose I think this whole experience just taught her a lot of humility and was just grounded in a kind of just the concept of regret and choosing the wrong path. I think that's very relatable as well.
I was thinking about the sense that I've been trying to work with the Branwen story for years now, but I just cannot bring myself to be with the part of the story where the horses are mutilated. I've thought about it, like, it seems very strange to have a trigger warning at the start of an episode, but it's like, if you are someone who truly adores horses, this may be too hard to hear. But I could actually think of people who, clients and friends who, that would be a violence to them that they would feel like they had to be prepared for.
Yes.
And so I've been with that story and backed off from it and tried to find different ways to tell it. And I just want to say thank you for offering us something that is just as horrible in such a sensitive way, in order to say, this story needs to be told. And there's something horrible in the core of it, but you hold it with such sensitivity that it ends up being something truly beautiful. And of course, they get to go into the other world, and the way that the tears and the blood blend together. It's like, oh, they'll be saved by magic. Thank the gods, right?
Happy ending, because that always, I think, the only thing that's upset me more in Irish mythology has been the story of Anya, just how brutal that can be. But there was just something about Maol and how, we don't have that much actually to base, our legend of Flidais. We don't actually have that much to go on. But Maol is the central character, and both he and Flidais are described in sort of transactional ways. So, like, Maol is the cow of plenty. She could feed hundreds. And then the only kind of really notable piece of writing that we have about Flidais talks to how one night with her, Fergus said that it was equal to a night with 7 women. But even that's very transactional and completely from his point of view. Also, there appears to have been a lot of conflation with Flidais and Ellen of the Woods. I can't find a record of Flidais having horns, but that's kind of like passed down now. And it's almost like when you hear other people talk about it, it's almost like that makes her less human, or less like she kind of just more of an animal than a deity or a human. And it's a denigration of sorts. And certainly back when all of these kind of descriptions about like Fergus's sexual appetites and things like that, that was like really a damning kind of a description to attribute to any character that was female. So it's just really, really layered. And I think I wanted to take a lot of those things on in the story. I wanted to see things from her perspective as somebody who loves, regrets, hurts, just has the whole kind of range. And just no more than Maol isn't just what they do for others.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back to this idea of animal, because there's a moment in which Fergus says, she's just an animal. And then she says to him, oh, you're the animal. And that's always a point of fascination for me. We think about how important it is to be fully human. We want to be humanitarians. We're looking at the human cost of wars. And we think about there's climate change, and then there's climate refugees, and where we look at the human toll. And then we also can think about the sense of we're seeking to be part of the more than human world, as David Abrams said. And we think about John Moriarty talking about that being human is a habit that can be broken. And I always find it one of those fascinating things where, and maybe it's a kind of a sacred paradox of, like, at once we want to be more human, and we know that we need to embrace that. Maybe that will stop war and conflict and all of these ways in which people are terrible to each other. And yet we also know that there's the transcendence of, what if we didn't just have to be stuck in these human ways, which seems so flawed. Whereas the animal, perhaps there's the salvation and the wildness, but then perhaps there's the other end of the spectrum, and that's where the darkness is, because there's no control over those animal instincts. Will you play with me in this for a little bit? I'd love to hear your take on it.
I love that. And I spend a lot of time thinking about that as well, in a slightly different way, because I guess when I think of kind of like what it means to be human, a big part of that is the idea of kind of civilization. And a big part of that are the systems we live in. And I think especially for women, it's really important to access the wildness, for want of a better word, like Clarissa Pinkola Estes writes so beautifully about this, we have to go out into the woods and be feral, and that's where we can reclaim our true selves. So we do have that animal nature, that animal instinct. I think particularly as women, it's, again, the word eclipsed is coming up, but it's like, it's proper ladies don't behave like X, Y, or Z, you know, and I think it's an excavation process to decondition yourself from these kind of ways of thinking. And then, as you said, it's so layered and complex, because when we do look at the wild, it's brutal. It is brutal out there. But I think that the idea of sentience and considered thought is what they don't have in the wild that we do have. And I think that kind of sense of consciousness should actually kind of hopefully reach a point. And I think the Buddhists do this the best, really. I feel like the Buddhists that have written on this, I find they are the most kind of articulate on this. And the concept that I see it is that we are interconnected, like we're all part of the same thing. We're all just trying to walk each other home. And just that kind of a sense of respecting that, the principle of non-harming people. The Tibetan Buddhists say that pride is a cause of all suffering. And certainly in the story, you can see that. But again, in the story, you can see where power, out of control power, can kind of lead, as opposed to taking a more loving approach. So I feel like we do have the choice and animals don't. So it's on us to really, I mean, there's not another species that I can think of that would destroy their habitat the way that we have as humans, right? And we actually have, the capability to really analyze these things and look at the scientific evidence and weigh things up. But yeah, we don't. We're kind of deeply flawed that way. It's just, I think things would change a lot for us as a species if we had more of a collective view and less of an individualistic one. And again, I really see to the systems we live in, and yeah, especially capitalism, late stage capitalism. So yeah, I think about it all the time, as you can gather.
Yeah, and it's the Celtic knot, right? It just kind of keeps folding in on itself and saying, oh, well, I mean, and I guess it also comes to the sense of there is no single answer. It's the both and. It's that sense of expanding the consciousness to say, we are not just that, because proof will tell us in a million ways. It's not just the one way. It's this and it's that. It's this and it's that.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. And it's so true. And it's about these seeming opposites kind of living alongside each other. I find that very interesting as well, especially with the concept of like Sheila Nagig that I had to get in there at the end. Sheila Nagig usually presents herself in most of my writing for grown-ups. She presented herself at the end of this one, but I love the paradox of Sheila. She's a crone, but she's also a fertility talisman, and find her fascinating.
Oh, I love how she made her way in completely. I think I had a specific thought about that, but I just wrote in my notes, Sheila in very, very large letters, which maybe just is that sense of like, she is such an enigma in so many ways, but we should just make sure that we say her name with a great deal of emphasis, because maybe that's all we can know at first as a portal into her.
You have just taken the words out of my mouth. That's exactly how it is. I found Sheila, or maybe Sheila found me in 2009. And since then, I have tried to read everything I can. I just find this absolute symbol absolutely fascinating, this archetype. And that's a long time ago, right? So that's been a lot of reading, a lot of study. And I've visited Sheila's in the wild, but honestly, she is a complete enigma. And you're right, she is a portal of transformation. And our journeys might differ, but you're guaranteed their transformation there. So that's exactly it. I'm really happy and pleased that we are aligned on this, because it's nice sharing stories when somebody kind of gets something that's not really explicitly stated in it. That makes me very happy. That makes my heart sing.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and just the sense of like, she's the one who like, that's the last note that Fleisch leaves before she goes back to her world. And that sense almost of like, we've traded. Oh, isn't that an interesting theory? The reason why we have so little of Fleisch is because she traded her story for Sheila. And Sheila came in and Fleisch went out. And now we're left with a new mystery We have more images of Sheila, but we don't know her story either.
Oh, I love that. That feels true to me. That's deeply resonant as you say it. I love it. This is great. This is answering a lot of questions I've had since 2009.
Well, I really discovered Sheila like probably in like 1999, 2000. And when I wrote my undergraduate thesis, I had this enormous Sheila on the cover of my thesis. And she was maybe mentioned once or twice in the whole thing, but I just said, no, she's the guardian spirit of all this writing that I did. Writing 117 pages when you're 21 years old is quite the undertaking, and you need quite the patron. Oh, I'm just so glad she's sort of here holding us in this moment. All these
Absolutely.
years later.
Yeah. And I've been reading a lot of very interesting connections between her and the idea of sympathetic magic, that you touch something and then you are imbued with its powers. Like there are lots of accounts of farmers presenting news to the Sheila in spring to guarantee a nice year ahead, a nice kind of abundant harvest, abundant yield from the animals. And I think because I've been so interested in that notion of kind of touch and sense and like a felt sense of the magic kind of made its way into the story as well. But I really have no idea what's going to show up at the ending of these stories. Really, it's anyone's guess.
Well, and it's the portal into the next story, right? You may not necessarily write one that picks up at that next moment, but I think that's something we do as creatives. It's a gift we can give to ourselves that says, oh, there's always one last stitch that's not tied off.
Yes.
And that just engages us creatively again, so we can come back in and maybe start what sounds like a completely new narrative, but it's like in the depths, this is actually still that continuation of everything I was still curious about at the end of that last story.
I love that. I love that idea about the stitch being left. It reminds me of the concept of the mending stitch. And I'm fascinated about the idea of weaving that in any, mythological canon I come across. I just find it fascinating. So yeah, I love that. I love that so much.
Well, you and I happen to be recording this on solstice, and this will come out shortly after. We'll certainly be in this summer season. I'd love to hear a little bit about why that came in. That you mentioned Litha in the story. Was there significance for you around the time of year for the story, or does it just happen to be that you're writing it in this moment? I'm always curious when times of year come in and what that might mean.
Thanks so much for asking that. Again, it's such a joy to share a story with somebody who kind of notices not exactly Easter eggs, but you know what I mean? These are kind of pretty deep. Yeah, it was completely deliberate. So I wanted to follow the wheel of the year. At the start of the story, she speaks about winter, then she gets to Imbolc, and then, the full kind of year passes. And then we get to Litha. And the reason is because I think that's the ultimate portal time. The portal of I find the veil to be as thin as Samhain, and I know that's a controversial thing to say, but it's just from spending. I'm just so blessed that ever since I was a little girl, I've always been either taken by family members to these beautiful sacred sites. They call them historical sites then. I've been going to them for a really long time, and it's just, you can feel the magic of nature being stronger sometimes than other times. And for me, Litha, with the light, especially if you go to somewhere like Loch Gur in Limerick, Canuck Anya, again, Anya's come up now. I just think the light feels like a reward. That's how I see it. It's just this really, it's impossible to hold on too much to any kind of sadness or disappointment or whatever it is when you're just faced with this beautiful, exquisite brightness and light in nature. Like there are tons of kind of reasons for this, like the opposite would be seasonal affective disorder, you know what I mean? There's plenty of reasons why this is, but I suppose because I've been experiencing it since I was a little girl, I've always associated it with very kind of a magical experience, which is beautiful. And also, as I said, I think the amount of light just feels like a reward for any kind of, other things you'd be working through. And then I find Samhain then quite a somber holiday. I find that very focused on my ancestors a lot. I find it, more about kind of death and what's past. But I find Litha has the hope and promise of tomorrow and newness and freshness. So that's a little bit self-indulgent of me now, because it's not really based on anything I've read. It's just my experience.
I would call it a gift. I'm going to say I'm gratefully accepting that. So here we are. It's 100 degrees Fahrenheit outside right now. The entire eastern part of the United States is under what they're calling this heat dome, like 200 and something million people. And, heat is, it was yesterday at Mecca where 900 people died in the heat. Like, this is happening right now in a way that is heartbreaking and terrifying. And this, we were speaking before, around this idea of how we're capable of destroying our environment as our dear species with all of its gifts and all of its terrors. But here we are at a moment when the sun becomes frightening, when this heat that belongs, perhaps we would imagine, in some distant desert, with a cattle skull and a cactus, is instead becoming part of our lives in parts of the world that had never expected that. And allowing for there to be a blessing in a timeless blessing in this time of year, in this Greenstadt, in the solstice, that the sun is stopping and shining on us extra. And yes, it's true that in this, the sun shines too hot and it can hurt us. But what if we could pause and be with that truth, but also be in the gift that is the light, and really hold both of them at the same time?
That is really beautiful. And it feels like a big synchronicity that you're mentioning it. I'm doing a little bit of work on the Sun Tarot card on green at the moment. And the shadow of the sun, people don't really speak about it that often, but it's exactly as you said, too much sun, it can burn. So we're not supposed to be in permanent summer either. So it is important to be mindful of both of those things. People often in readings, when the sun card comes up, it's like they're just so happy about it. But it's just, there are a lot of layers to it. So just using that card as an archetype and exploring it a little bit in these times, it actually is easier to explain than I guess it ever was, as you said, with all of those occurrences. And yeah, I can't even bring myself to bring other examples. It's, as you say, heartbreaking.
Yeah. Mm. Well, my dear Regina, as we sort of get toward the close of our time together, I guess I have two different questions, and then maybe you want to answer one or both. But the first one is, you've mentioned tarot only briefly, and I'm wondering, I feel like we could launch an entire other conversation about that, and maybe we'll have to at some point. So whether you want to talk a little bit more about tarot, or whether there's something else in the story, feel like we didn't get a chance to touch on in our time together.
It's been amazing sharing the story with you, because you're so aligned with it, and it resonated in you in a way that I really hoped that it would. So thank you so much for that. And then with the tarot, then I'm working on a little project at the moment called Journey Through the Tarot via Irish Her Story. And that came as an idea to me because, as you know, the illustrator of the Rider-Waite Tarot deck, Pamela Coleman Smith, so little is known about her. People don't even know where she's buried, even though she died in a really small little village in Cornwall. But she died in an unmarked grave. She had no money or anything like that. She got paid a flat fee to do the 78 drawings of the tarot, which was the first deck to ever have a drawing on every card. And it wasn't very much. And if she hadn't actually initialed each card, she would have completely descended into obscurity. And this has always stuck with me. I think most tarot practitioners have a little bit of guilt. It's like, well, here we are now. Pamela's illustrations have pretty much taught us the tarot, because every single item she includes in there means something. She's made it so easy for us really to read each card. And yet she didn't reap the work. She didn't see this, how famous it was going to become, how she would be a household name, how lush she would become. And so I realized then how many Irish, women throughout history had the same story, So I guess I wanted to kind of link that piece, and sort of like a rising tide lifts all boats kind of an idea. So just to kind of talk about women that made kind of big enough contributions when, some of them made huge contributions, but weren't really ever credited properly for it either. So I'm doing that on Substack. I am up to the Wheel of Fortune. So I've done 11. So I have 67 to go, but we'll get there in the end. And yeah, I really love sharing these connections between these women in Irish history and the tarot. So yeah, if that would resonate with anybody, perhaps they consider visiting Substack.
What a tremendous undertaking, and what such a labor of love that calls together so many of your gifts and your passions and just feels like just a gorgeous service
Thank you
that we
so
also
much.
sorely need. Like I see them come in, and I admit I've been saving some of them. Goodness gracious, what was that first thing you said? The curse of plenty, right? That she's suffering with. And in so many ways, like that is precisely where we are right now in terms of this tremendous output of scholarship and art and creativity and spirit and heart in everything, but even in Substack, you and I are both denizens of that space.
Oh, it is. There's so really good stuff. Like I love it, but I can't keep up with it myself. I
Right.
love it. I save, and I'm so grateful for some of these beauty. Like there's just so much beauty on there.
Yeah.
But I feel under pressure actually to be able to keep up sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And I kind of love that we're landing at this place, because I had written in my notes as you were talking that gluttony and greed were a couple of the sort of, well, to mixed traditions, the sins that appeared in this story that you named. But how do we end up accidentally falling into those places and hoarding, and when we just have so much at our fingertips, and then it's like the seeds and the harvest we cannot reap because there's so many different ideas. That is completely me speaking from my place right now. That just feels like I used to work at a college library, and we had t-shirts made, and we had to inventory the million volumes, and everyone had t-shirts on that said so many books, so little time. And I know you're a daughter of bookshops too, so you understand this, but I guess I'm speaking for my own self in terms of like, oh, there's the curse of plenty of so many ideas that we want to just immerse ourselves in. And then there's
So I
this and that and all the other distractions.
so relate to that. And actually I saw something, I can't quite remember what it was, but it was a name of that the Japanese have for, the unread book pile. I'm just like the queen of that. I think most people feel like that. It's just there's so many things on our time. And so I definitely relate to that one.
Yeah. It's a full sun sort of problem, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, Regina, thank you so much for this gift of your time, of your story, of your insight, of the weaving that you've done here to call together this story and all of its resonance. It's really gets me in the core. I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for understanding and for just giving me the opportunity to tell the story. And also, I just really appreciate the depth that you've just resonate with it. I really do appreciate that. It's sometimes when you're working away on these things, you feel like, is anybody reading these at all? It's like I'm kind of creating in a vacuum. So it's really nice to be able to share some words with people. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm going to get you back here sometime soon.
Anytime.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the KnotWork Storytelling Podcast. Please subscribe and review the show on your favorite podcast platform, and do share this episode with other lovers of myth and story. By the way, everyone is a lover of myth and story, even if they've forgotten. Creating this show is a labor of love, and your support will help me continue to craft and share stories through this season and beyond. Please consider becoming a subscriber to my paid newsletter, Myth is Medicine. You'll find it on Substack, and that's where all my newest writing and occasional bonus podcasts can be found. You can learn more about my writing, my book, our online creative community, The Writer's Knot, as well as how to work with me as a writing coach over at marisagowdy.com. Gratefully, I live, write, work, and record this podcast on the ancestral lands of the Munsee Lenape tribe, whose name means original people.